Sam Rasoul has been serving Virginians as the delegate from Roanoke since he was first elected in 2014. In his 4 terms in the General Assembly, he has been consistently prioritized everyday Virginians and the future of our planet in the legislation he has supported. He has a passion for identifying common struggles we all share and bringing people together to fight for the common good, from speaking out against fracked gas pipelines we don't need to voting against ratepayer ripoffs. Sam has been showing up for communities across Virginia fighting for justice. Sam has a background in healthcare administration, nonprofit management, finance, and organizational change. In 2008, he was the youngest candidate in the US for Congress. In 2016, he launched the Impact Center, which has helped support and train more than 1,000 activists and candidates across Virginia to win through the science of trust and coalition building. His guiding philosophy starts with the golden rule: treat others as you would want to be treated. Sam leads with his values of respect, fairness, and liberty for all. He lives in Roanoke with his spouse Laylee and their 3 children. Delegate Rasoul, thank you so much for joining us this evening. The floor is yours.
Well, thank you, and good evening, everyone. I hope you all are doing well. We are in and out of the floor right now with votes, and so I apologize if I will need to take a break in the middle of things if something pops up real fast. So we're hot and heavy into session, but it is great to see so many familiar faces. So good to see you. I see Kathy in the middle of my screen, and many others: Priscilla, Catherine, Jennifer. Thank you for wanting to learn more about the Green New Deal Act. Sam, were we going to speak off the slides? We just had a few slides to just hit a few highlights, and then we can hopefully spend most of our time in question and answer. Looks like our slides are a little funky, but here are the main pieces to the Green New Deal Act. There's a fossil fuel moratorium, which says that we will stop building new fossil fuel infrastructure, and there's a definition of what that actually means. That begins January 1, 2022, so pretty immediate. There are strong labor protections, a more aggressive RPS, or renewable portfolio standard, which begins, it takes us to 100% by 2036. We have a large percentage of investments going to what we call environmental justice communities. So the whole premise, and we'll talk about this in a moment, of all of it is to take an intersectional approach. Transition assistance for fossil fuel workers or workers impacted by this. And then a newer component in the latest version in our draft is to really make sure that we take it to Dominion and the utilities from an accounting perspective. See, what they're really good at doing is manipulating the accounting, and they steal a lot of money from us as ratepayers. And so we've got one piece to fix a lot of the accounting problem that we have. So in the next slide, we'll talk about the intersectionality. So this is really kind of the most important piece to think through. You know, what's been frustrating, I'm in my 8th year in the General Assembly, and I would have environmental justice advocates come in, economic justice, social justice. You know, you get the unions, the Sierra Clubs, and the NAACPs of the world, and they would come in and be advocating for their pieces. The problem is, fundamentally, is that many times we're simply just not big enough or powerful enough in our silos to get much done. So what was very interesting about the Green New Deal for me when I began to get involved and help to found it 2 years ago was the intersectionality of it, where we brought together and locked arms and said, we're going to approach the environmental crisis that we have in a way that intentionally, economically uplifts people in a socially just way, And there are very specific strategies and tactics that we can be utilizing for that. But just as important, or if not more important, is the fact that we can't get any of it done, really, without building a broad-based coalition. And that's what the Green New Deal is about, the coalition, and specifically the Green New Deal Act itself, for sure. So you see some of the pieces here. And I apologize, our slides are a little bit funky today. For some reason, they're not translating well into Google Slides, but I think you get a good drift there. So next steps, House Bill 1937 is in the House. The problem is that it has not been docketed, and we are hot and heavy into session. So you can surmise from that we are having an issue trying to make sure that this gets pushed and gets a fair hearing. And so that's where you all come in. Session will go very quickly this year, maybe quicker than it's ever been, or at least during my time, just because of COVID. We're all in this kind of virtual setting, trying to get things done. But we need your help and advocacy in pushing House Bill 1937. But just as important is to break out of your environmental justice bubble and figure out how we can build, broad coalitions together to try to get a lot of this good work done. And that's always been a big passion of mine. So that kind of gives you a little bit of a snippet there. And with that, I'd love to take any questions that you all might have about the Green New Deal, Green New Deal Act, some of the work that we've done.
I'll just let folks know the chat is also open for questions. If you don't want to speak or you don't have the ability to, feel free to post questions in the chat as well.
So is this just for Virginia?
Thank you for that question. Yes, so the Green New Deal, you can think of the Green New Deal as this huge umbrella, the big idea, that we've seen for several years. And there's a Green New Deal bill in the federal Congress. And then we wanted to bring, what can we be doing at the state level to bring forward the Green New Deal Act here? And so it's a comprehensive bill. So the bill that we've described is what we have here in Virginia. So one or two things you might find in the Green New Deal Act, or it's not called Green New Deal Act, but the Green New Deal at the federal level, you might find more transportation infrastructure. You might find certain things like federal jobs guarantees. So there are some other components that the federal government, or at the federal level, they're able to easily integrate in. But the Green New Deal Act, HB 1937, is what's in the Virginia legislature right now that we're currently considering.
I have a question.
Sure.
Hypothetically speaking, if one were having trouble getting the presider of their legislative body to assign a bill to committee, what would be the best way to persuade that individual to assign a bill to a committee?
Well, thank you so much for asking there, and I love your window, Tyler.
Oh, yeah.
Looking nice and snazzy, and I almost didn't recognize you because I think you've done a little bit of shaving.
Yeah, but I used to have a beard like the here.
Yeah.
I lost like 10 years of my life.
Now you're not, yeah.
Gained it. But yeah.
So there's a couple of things that you can do. Obviously everyone can contact the speaker who's in charge of this and in charge of assigning bills to committees. And then also what people can do is contact folks who may be also Green New Deal supporters who are in the district of the speaker or others who may have positions of influence to try to say, hey, at least let this thing get a hearing. Last year, at least we got a hearing. This year, we have not been docketed as of yet. Which is not good news. So that's where I would put my pressure. Thank you for that, Tyler. Young Tyler.
So Sam, what's the worst case scenario here then? So if it doesn't get docketed this session, what's the game plan sort of moving forward into looking at next year and what to do in the interim?
Well, I hope to be advocating for the Green New Deal in a different capacity next year. Look where we started 2 years ago, a little over 2 years ago. Here's what happened is I saw these youngsters rush the Capitol, and it was the Sunrise Movement. I'm like, oh my God, how do I get more of that here? So I contacted these folks at Sunrise National, and they're like, well, we don't really do, state level stuff right now. I said, well, all I need is kind of your name, and I'll put together the coalition. We got 9 core founding organizations with NAACP and Sierra Club and some others. And Green New Deal was born 2 years ago. And now there are over 50 organizations. Now there are a bunch of working groups. And while the Green New Deal Act is the kind of signature piece of legislation, there are actually 7 or 8 other pieces of legislation that are part of the package of bills. So you can kind of think of it, let's call it think of it more of like a movement where this coalition has broadened and is bigger than ever. And these work groups work throughout the year to develop these pieces of legislation. So they took my Green New Deal Act from last year that I had put in and developed some ideas on how to improve it. I took many of those and put it into this bill, and that's what you have before you. So you can think of it as a process that we keep building and pushing the conversation, which is important, and it has shifted the conversation a good bit. For example, and we don't have to go too deep into it, but the Clean Economy Act was to be championed, this awesome thing that was passed. And of course, we know that was quite the ripoff of Virginia ratepayers. And to me, an unethical approach to an environmental plan because it exacerbates income inequality and fundamentally undermines the environmental movement. And that is definitely not what we should be doing and moving forward. So as we think beyond this session, keep a couple of things in mind, joining the movement and trying to improve upon this piece of legislation, but also the other kind of package, because we have these different work groups that focus on different components of the intersectional movement, depending on what you're excited about. But secondly is really understanding and hopefully appreciating the value of wanting to be intersectional in our progressive push. And sometimes that means we'll have to be a little uncomfortable. If you're an environmental silo, it's kind of like maybe a very comfortable place to be. You're used to it. You could commiserate together and all that good stuff. But all of a sudden, when you've got a union worker who's like, hey, I don't care if I'm building a pipeline. I need to feed my family. All of a sudden, it forces you to think, okay, how can we do this together? How about you build some solar panels and we can feed your family that way. We'll advocate together. And then they say, okay, well, that's a plan. That makes sense to me. But we have to be able to do some of that work, that groundwork in building those coalitions. I think we've got Kathy.
Yeah, hi. Thanks, Sam, for being here tonight. And I think you just said that one of the 5 pieces was the fossil fuel moratorium.
Mhm.
And I was wondering if that is a bill that has been introduced. And if you could talk more about that. It's my understanding that it is, but I'm not sure. Thanks.
Yes, so the Green New Deal Act, HB 1937, has a fossil fuel moratorium in it. So it has many components in the one bill. But then separately, we actually have a different bill, which is carried by Delegate Josh Cole as part of the Green New Deal package, which is a standalone fossil fuel moratorium. So it doesn't have any of the other components. It just says no more new fossil fuel infrastructure as well. So Josh Cole is carrying that bill. And so we hope, of course, to get both of them passed. Thank you.
Hi, Sam. This is Priscilla. I've got a question for you. It's more of on an individual level.
Sure.
So Rizwan and I have a contract in on our house to have solar panels installed this spring. So we will be deriving 103% of our average monthly energy from them. And it's my understanding that this year compared to next year, some of the tax incentives have decreased. This year compared to last year. So basically, had we gotten them before December 31st, it would have been more beneficial for us tax time in our state income taxes than it's going to be now. So I was wondering if there was going to be, I'm guessing that these graduated decreases were put into place a few years ago before there was as much awareness. And so I'm wondering if that's something that perhaps down the road, obviously it's going to be irrelevant to us, but perhaps down the road y'all could revisit as the momentum builds. And then, when you're hopefully governor.
Yeah, thank you so much. The major tax credit, so unfortunately Virginia does not do a great job with some of these incentives and is way behind even North Carolina, who's had these incentives for well over a decade. And that's why they have, until recently, they've had like 100 times more solar than Virginia, believe it or not. The major tax incentives have actually come from the federal government. And the federal government, my wife and I on our house had our solar panels installed in 2019. And that's when we were able to kind of maximize that credit, which was like 30% at that point, which was pretty huge. And and then there's a graduated decrease of that. So what we can be doing is kind of two things: advocating at the federal level. Our U.S. House members, there at your house is Jennifer Wexton, if I'm not mistaken. And so asking Jennifer Wexton, asking our two senators to make sure that we do more to prolong and the benefit that is there, but also to increase that benefit back to a higher level, which would be great. And then the second piece is to take a good hard look and see, what more can we be doing, because we don't have great benefits here at the state level in moving forward. And that's always been a battle with, quite frankly, with the utilities, who kind of want to control a lot of where the money goes, because with each credit, a state credit actually costs money. We have to, the way we look at it is a deduction from the budget. And so the utilities have really gotten in the way there. So those are kind of the two strategies that we should be taking as we move forward. Thank you for that.
Thank you. Thank you for that answer. And thank you for holding this forum. We appreciate it.
Yeah, you're welcome. Y'all, it's Tuesday. Y'all look like it's Monday. Okay. We can smile a little bit. Kathy,
Yeah, I wanted to follow up on one of your responses about the Clean Economy Act. And I admit I haven't done my homework on this at all. And I was just very interested in your comment and wondered if you would explain a little bit more, your thinking about that, because it is being touted as a good thing. And so I haven't focused on it.
So what the Clean Economy Act does is it makes a few modest improvements and progress on some environmental goals. So we'll have an RPS which says that we'll get to 100% clean energy, which is one definition, which we can talk about separately. For example, by 2045. And it lays out several other pieces in what we're going to be doing with regards to battery storage technology, et cetera. So those environmental goals are a step in the forward, not nearly as aggressive as they need to be or could be in Virginia. But people can say, hey, we can come back and even improve on those, like next year. So this is next year now, because that was last year. And we'll probably see a few improvements on that. And that's very reasonable. What's not reasonable and what's unethical about it is that we said we're going to do these things, but we're only going to do these things by thoroughly enriching Dominion in doing so. In fact, when I argued it on the floor, I argued that, my gosh, we're going to allow for a 23.9% increase in the bills of Dominion residents in particular in this, and we don't need to do that. Like, there's no reason. We can make all the same investments, do all the same work without increasing those bills by by roughly a quarter. Well, what has turned out to be the case is subsequently the SEC has even gone deeper into the numbers and realized it could increase by 40% your bills, all to make sure that Dominion makes a lot of money. So the capital side, the cost of that bill is about $50 billion. The initial cost. The newer projections are maybe upward of $80 billion to the ratepayer. By the way, the ratepayers pay all this. And then the profit side of that is at least $12.5 billion as we move forward. And all of this is well documented. And ProPublica did a long piece on the big ripoff, and as they've called it. And so this is kind of fundamentally what we have here. And so some people say, well, look, we gotta, we have to pay for this big wind project. It's way more complicated than that. We have a huge wind project that we allowed to say is going to be built. But you have to remember how utilities make money, all right? It's really, really simple to understand. Utilities don't make money like normal businesses. Normal business, you have your sales, you have your expenses, and then you make your profit, right? We've all kind of seen that before. How utilities make money is very interesting. It's a percentage of the stuff that they own. So Kathy, you live in a home, and that home is worth $300,000. And so that home, you're guaranteed that every year you're going to get 10% of the value of that home. So you're going to get $30,000 a year because that's the guarantee. Dominion's going to get 10% of the stuff that they own. So what's their incentive? Own as much stuff as possible. And if it's more expensive than it needs to be, even better. So they're like, oh, well, we're going to just build this massive, very expensive wind project, and we're going to not put any cost constraints on it. It could potentially cost 2 to 3 times more what comparable projects cost. But that's better for us and our shareholders because we get 10% every year on the value of the asset that is built. And we get to just bill you, the ratepayer. This is the perverse system that we have in Virginia that is, abusing you, the ratepayer. That's now very, very well documented. And unfortunately, it's in large part because they continue to pump lots of money into the campaign coffers of people like me. They don't give it to me, but I'm saying legislators like me. So we're 100% funded by individuals. Thank you, Kathy.
I got another question if you have time.
Sure thing.
Yeah. So putting on my work hat, I'm a congressional grant officer at a place called the Corps Network. We're like the successor for the Civilian Conservation Corps. I'm not sure if you're familiar with it. It's one of the programs that FDR started way back when, went through the process, a couple different variations, revitalizations, and here we are now. So we oversee a lot of conservation corps across the country, some here in Virginia, using what we call the core model within, and we have a lot of AmeriCorps grants doing the type of working on infrastructure, working on weatherization projects, working on things that might be relevant to the Green New Deal. I haven't read the entire thing verbatim, so I'm not even ignorant on it. Do you see a place for, if so the core model taps into utilizing opportunity youth or youth in general, ages like 16 to 35, 16 to 24 and up to 35 if they're vets, to get into the trades, to work on infrastructure projects, to work on our national parks and our state parks, stuff like that. Do you see, is there any opportunity, do you think, for organizations, corps, or AmeriCorps programs to tap into anything within the Green New Deal as it's currently written?
Yeah, it is great. So let's talk at the federal level.
Yeah.
That's wonderful, and I'm glad you brought it up. And there's this beautiful video. I don't know if you all have seen the AOC video from, it's almost a year and a half, 2 years old, where I don't exactly know what they call it, but where it's kind of a paint over. I think it was, I need to find it and send you the link. It's a 7-minute video where she talks from the future looking back, like here's what happened and here's how the Green New Deal changed. And she specifically talks about how the new Corps was used for wetland restoration, was used for all of these different kinds of projects. And it's exactly right. The legacy now from what FDR had set up, as Tyler had mentioned, has gone through many iterations. But that is, while not articulated in the Green New Deal Act itself, outside of investments in environmental justice communities at the state level, at the federal level, we can certainly, and it's a great way to uplift these environmental justice communities. So I think it's a wonderful, wonderful idea. Is that the one you found? You found it, Jonathan? I just think it's beautiful.
Yeah.
Yeah, from maybe a year and a half ago or so. I think she did the voiceover there and did such a great job with it. So thank you for that question, for sure. Well,
Thank you.
I appreciated the opportunity to be with you all and to have some of your questions, and thank you as we're trying to get it all done during this session. But I really appreciate your advocacy, and thanks for giving me the opportunity to kind of share with you my perspective on how I think we should be approaching this, but also a lot of progressive issues. I think that the future of progressive politics can only be done through broad coalitions. It will not be sustainable for us to be advocating in specific silos. The biggest reason is because there's just so much money on the other side of these issues. that we've got to be able to beat them back with our brute force in these coalitions. So that's what, I mean, Kathy, the Stricklers know me from when I ran for U.S. House back in 07 and 08, and that's what we fought for back then when I was pushing for single-payer health care and pushing for a lot of this kind of intersectional approach even to environmental issues. And that's where we're at today. I haven't, even with 8 years in the legislature, I haven't lost that idealism, because I really believe that's the future of getting a lot of this good stuff done, which means, you know, making sure that we try to be arms wide open when we're trying to build these coalitions and try to meet a lot of people where they're at, because, you know, we have many different perspectives. But I appreciate you all bringing me into your virtual living room on this Tuesday evening. Sam is a member of our staff, and she is one of your points of contact if you want to get in touch with us. But, you know, as I saw the question popped up about our run for lieutenant governor, we hope to you know, continue pushing that in a newer capacity as things move forward. So thank you so much, Jonathan, for opening up our room today, and thank you for all of the wonderful questions. It's been great talking to all of you.
And thank you for being with us. Appreciate it.
You're welcome. You're welcome. Thank you.